The slowest, most silent destruction isn't a single explosion. It's the gradual drift into a life you never consciously agreed to live. Most people believe failure announces itself with sirens. They think they'll feel the ground shift beneath them the moment they make a critical error. But reality is far more deceptive. It doesn't trigger alarms when you settle for the comfortable job that drains your spirit. It doesn't send notifications when you stay in relationships that have quietly expired. The world allows you to feel perfectly fine while your potential quietly evaporates, day after unnoticed day. You wake up, perform your routines, nod along to the expectations placed upon you, and convince yourself that movement equals progress. But what if the direction you're moving was never truly yours? One catastrophic choice rarely ruins a life. What destroys futures is the accumulation of small, undramatic compromises. The decision to silence your intuition one more time. The habit of choosing short-term peace over long-term alignment. These moments compound silently, and before you recognize the pattern, you're living a reality that belongs to someone else's blueprint. Waking up inside a stranger's body, in a career you fell into, surrounded by connections that feed nothing real in you. The fire, the certainty, the belief that your best chapters are still ahead, all of it dims not from tragedy, but from 1,000 tiny surrenders you never even noticed yourself making. This isn't another motivational speech designed to make you feel temporarily inspired. This is a diagnostic. A structured look at the invisible forces that pull capable people off course. Because if you're receiving this message now, the window for correction is still open. Let me ask you something with complete honesty. When you envision the version of yourself that commands genuine respect, that builds something lasting, that moves through life with clarity and purpose, what do you assume? 2. Separates that person from where you stand today? Most will answer discipline, hard work, consistency, and those elements matter. They form the foundation. But here's the layer most never uncover. Effort without intelligence doesn't construct power. It constructs burnout. You can outwork everyone in your vicinity. You can sacrifice sleep, health, and presence. You can exhaust yourself completely and still arrive at a destination that leaves you hollow. Because exertion without strategic direction is simply motion. It fills time but builds nothing enduring. The real traps aren't laziness. They're the loyalties you never examined. The real traps aren't visible enemies. They're the emotional reactions you justified in moments of weakness. They're the trust you extended to people who hadn't demonstrated they deserved it. They're the validation you chased from sources that had no investment in your actual growth. These invisible currents catch the well-intentioned, the hard-working, slowly redirect them. And by the time they look up, years have detached from their timeline, and the shoreline of their original vision is no longer visible. This is precisely the territory Niccolo Machiavelli mapped with brutal honesty centuries ago. When his name surfaces, popular imagination reaches for manipulation, for cynicism, for the dark arts of control. But that reading misses the depth entirely. What Machiavelli actually documented, with surgical precision, was human nature as it operates, not as we sentimentally wish it operated. He studied how authority dissipates, how sincere intentions transform into exploitable weaknesses, how those hungry for acceptance inevitably serve agendas not their own. His observations weren't instructions for villains. They were survival protocols for the conscious, for those determined to see reality clearly and make decisions from that clarity, not from comforting fiction. In the sections ahead, I'll walk you through 7 strategic adjustments drawn directly from that unsentimental philosophy. 7 methods to identify the wrong trajectory before it permanently shapes your existence. By the end, you'll possess a lens through which to view your choices, a lens most people spend entire lifetimes never acquiring. And if you integrate even portions of what follows, your movement through the world will shift. You'll begin detecting the quiet erosion that others never sense until it's complete. If that kind of awareness is what you're here for, type unaware in the comments and let's begin. Number 1, interrogate every direction before you commit your weight to it. Here's a question that almost never gets asked with real seriousness. Why this path? Not the convenient answer. Not because it pays adequately. Not because others are rushing toward it. Not because someone whose approval you wanted pointed this way. The authentic answer. Why are you investing your irreplaceable hours in your current pursuit? Because Uncomfortable reality is that most individuals never select their trajectory. They inherit it. They absorb it from cultural osmosis. They follow the crowd, follow the trending advice, follow the well-meaning guidance of people who don't inhabit their specific circumstances. Then they spend precious years constructing something they never genuinely desired. Machiavelli warned about this with characteristic directness. He noted that the majority operate reactively. They don't author their existence, they respond to external pressures, expectations, and dominant narratives. And when you're reactive, when you're simply complying with the momentum around you, you're not walking your own road. You're paving someone else's. And here's the additional weight. When you're executing someone else's design, you're not merely losing time. You're becoming instrumental to objectives that may not include your welfare. The executive who climbed for 15 years and arrived at a corner office that feels like a cage. The entrepreneur who built a venture that looks impressive on paper but connects to no genuine vision. The person who selected a partner, a location, an identity because it appeared correct externally while internally producing nothing but numbness. Machiavelli identified these as followers lacking intention. And followers lacking intention, he understood, remain perpetually subject to those who possess it. So the initial correction, before you invest deeply in any direction, examine it relentlessly. Not casually, not once, aggressively. What does this trajectory realistically yield in 5 years? In 10? Not the idealized version, the probable version. Ask yourself whose interests genuinely benefit from your choice of this road. Because sometimes the path presented to you serves primarily the presenter, the mentor guiding you towards safe stability while they built fortune on risk, the system that rewards your labor while preventing you from accumulating leverage, relationship that offers comfort while silently demanding your shrinkage. This doesn't imply universal malevolence. Most people offering direction are genuinely well-intentioned, but sincere guidance can still lead to the wrong destination. And following sincere but misaligned advice with unexamined commitment carries the same cost as following deliberate manipulation. Independent discernment isn't arrogance. It's self-preservation. It means weighing every option, every direction, every opening against your own calibrated standards, based on where you genuinely aim to arrive, not where convention suggests you should land. Strategy begins with sovereign thought. And sovereign thought begins with one deceptively simple practice, demanding justification before accepting any path placed in front of you. Number 2, release your grip on approval. This section may press against places you've protected from examination, because few acknowledge how extensively one invisible drive operates their life, the hunger to be accepted. Consider your last significant decision, not trivial choices, the ones with genuine weight. How much of that decision emerged from your authentic preference versus your projection of what others would validate? How frequently do you suppress your genuine perspective to avoid friction? How often do you nod along to positions you fundamentally reject, remain quiet when honesty was required, or alter your course entirely because someone signaled disapproval of your direction? If those questions create even subtle discomfort, attend to that sensation. It's pointing toward something operational. The compulsion to be liked ranks among the most potent eroders of personal authority ever catalogued. Machiavelli observed it with absolute clarity. He watched leaders, strategists, individuals who built their calculations around the reactions of others and noted they inevitably occupied fragile, vulnerable positions. Because each time they permitted another's judgment to outweigh their own, they transferred a fragment of their agency. And that's precisely what occurs. You transfer it. Fragment by fragment, decision by decision. Approval-seeking renders you predictable, and predictability equals controllability. When those surrounding you, colleagues, family, social circles, recognize that you recalibrate based on their response, you cease being someone with sovereignty over your existence. You become manageable. You become steerable. Because anyone need only display disappointment, withdraw warmth, or communicate disapproval, and you'll adjust. That isn't freedom. That's restraint camouflaged as connection. Let me distinguish something clearly. This isn't an argument for coldness, isolation, or indifference to those in your life. That would fundamentally misinterpret the principle. Machiavelli highlighted the distinction between respect and popularity. That distinction carries enormous weight. Popularity fluctuates, follows the room's temperature. It demands continuous maintenance and endless compromise. It requires you to present slightly altered versions of yourself depending on audience. And its exhausting quality. It never genuinely satisfies because approval secured through accommodation doesn't register as real acknowledgement. Beneath awareness, you recognize you performed for it. Respect operates differently. It endure. It's generated through consistency, directness, and operation from authentic conviction. People don't ultimately respect those who agree with everything. They might enjoy them momentarily, but over time they cease taking them seriously. They cease viewing them as substantial. And sometimes without conscious recognition, they begin using that person's approval need as leverage. Here's the transformation that reorients everything. Stop selecting choices based on what will receive acceptance. Start selecting them based on what is accurate. Accurate to your actual objectives. Accurate to your actual values. Accurate to the existence you're genuinely constructing. When you release approval dependence, something significant shifts. You become harder to influence. Harder to pressure. Interactions transform. The quality of engagement with you changes. Not because you've become aggressive or difficult, but because you now occupy space with genuine conviction. And people register conviction. They respond to it even when they disagree. If your choices remain driven by external opinion, you're already misaligned, because you're not constructing your life. You're performing for spectators who hold no genuine stake in your future. Authority flows from respect. And authentic respect begins with respecting yourself adequately to make your own determinations, even when no applause follows. Number 3, observe thoroughly before you extend trust. The incorrect allies will dismantle you faster than any solo error you could possibly commit. Absorb that statement, because it carries disproportionate weight in this entire framework. The incorrect individuals positioned closely in your life, the wrong partner in a crucial venture, the wrong confidant during a formative season, the wrong advisor, the wrong person you granted access to your interior world, can cost you years, sometimes decades, sometimes opportunities that simply never return. This isn't an argument for pervasive suspicion. This is an argument for clarity, for honesty. Because the single greatest exposure most individuals carry isn't skill deficiency or inadequate ambition. It's trust extended prematurely to those who hadn't yet demonstrated qualification for it. Machiavelli invested substantial attention observing power structures, watching alliances form, watching betrayals unfold, watching capable individuals collapse not from external opposition but from the very people they identified as their closest associates. His conclusion unsettled many. Human nature demonstrates consistency. People, regardless of their expressed sentiments, regardless of their apparent warmth, operate fundamentally from 3 drivers: aspiration, envy, and self-preservation. This isn't cynicism. This is observation. And it's not condemnation of humanity. It's honest acknowledgement of how humans function. When you comprehend these drivers, you cease being astonished when someone acts to protect their interests, even at your expense. You cease being blindsided because you already understood what remained possible. The error most commit: they trust language. They trust a handshake, a warm exchange, a shared moment that felt authentic. And language costs nothing. Anyone can articulate appropriate sentiments. Anyone can express loyalty when loyalty costs them nothing. What demands study is behavior. Consistent behavior across varied circumstances over time. How does this person conduct themselves when kindness offers no return? How do they discuss others when those others aren't present? When they've erred, do they acknowledge it directly or do they redirect and rationalize? When you're facing difficulty, do they appear or do they quietly recede until conditions improve? These aren't complex observations, but they require patience, and they require willingness to see clearly even when you desire the connection to succeed. Machiavelli was explicit. Trust should expand gradually. Not because the world contains predominantly malicious actors, but because you genuinely cannot assess someone's foundation from one interaction or even several positive exchanges. You need to observe them under pressure, and they have something to gain at your expense. When they believe no one watches. When loyalty creates inconvenience, that observation demands time. And individuals genuinely worthy of your trust won't resent that process. They'll demonstrate their character consistently. They'll prove it without being asked. Your inner circle represents one of the most powerful determinants of your entire trajectory. Those closest influence your thinking, your confidence, your opportunity access, and your blind spots. If incorrect individuals occupy that circle, damage accumulates in ways difficult to fully measure. Be selective. Be patient. Be observant. And don't allow hunger for connection or partnership to bypass the only step that genuinely reveals someone's nature, time, and behavior. Distance protects your future. Select your inner circle as if your existence depends on it. Because in substantial ways it does. Number 4, master your emotional states before they master your direction. Let's examine the decisions that produce deepest regret, not the careless ones, not those made with insufficient information. The ones generating most pain are invariably those made while angry, terrified, or so flooded with excitement that judgment evacuated the premises entirely. Nearly every significant life regret traces to a determination made during emotional extremity. The relationship you remained inside too long because fear continuously generated what-if scenarios each time departure approached. The opportunity you abandoned in anger that you spent subsequent years wishing you'd retained. The venture you entered without examination because enthusiasm made everything appear obvious and certain until it wasn't. Emotions possess power, and they aren't adversaries. Let me emphasize that clearly. Emotions communicate genuine information. The challenge emerges when emotions become decision-makers. Because emotions evolved to generate rapid reaction, not clear analysis. They're designed for immediate response, not extended strategy. Anger constricts your focus to the present and makes immediate concerns outweigh any consequence. Anger declares, act now, manage consequences later. And consequences almost always follow. Fear causes retreat when advancement is required, or desperate clinging when release would serve. Fear disguises avoidance as prudence and labels it wisdom when it's actually paralysis. And excitement, possibly the most underestimated disruptor, floods cognition with optimism and silences the part of you that poses necessary questions. Machiavelli observed this pattern repeatedly in his analysis of leadership. He watched individuals possessing every resource, every strategic advantage, every legitimate path to enduring achievement discard everything in one moment of emotional reaction. Leaders who launched conflicts from wounded dignity. Advisors who exposed sensitive information during anger flashes. Capable people who abandoned winning positions simply because they couldn't tolerate the emotional discomfort of patience. Individuals who made permanent determinations from temporary emotional conditions. He understood that the strategic mind isn't an emotionless mind. It's a disciplined mind. A mind capable of experiencing everything. The anger, the fear, the excitement, the hurt, still choosing to pause before acting. That word matters more than almost any other in this section. Pause. That single action. Pausing before responding, before determining, before reacting. Constitutes one of the most trainable and most powerful capacities you'll ever develop. Because the pause generates space. And within that space something shifts. The emotion remains present but no longer drives. Your judgment has opportunity to engage. When you encounter charged moments, step back physically if necessary. Remove yourself from the environment. Grant it time. Even 60 minutes of distance from intense emotional states will meaningfully alter perspective. A full day of distance will sometimes reveal a situation entirely different from what you initially perceived. In those moments, ask yourself, if I weren't experiencing anger right now, would I still make this choice? If I weren't afraid, would I still retreat? If I weren't caught in enthusiasm's current, would I still consent without further inquiry? If the answer shifts even slightly, that shift is your signal. The emotion was determining, not you. Those who construct genuine lasting results, in ventures, careers, relationships, personal evolution, aren't always the most intelligent or talented. They're frequently the most regulated, not cold, not shut down, regulated. They experience everything and act from strategy. Your emotions provide information. Learn to interpret them, but never grant them final authority over significant determinations. That authority belongs to your judgment. And your judgment operates clearly only when you provide it space to breathe. Discipline forms the bridge between your current position and your genuine destination. Number 5. Recognize comfortable illusions as traps. The most hazardous territory in your current existence likely isn't the difficult place. It's the comfortable one. When conditions genuinely challenge you, when pressure intensifies, struggle defines your days. When situations clearly aren't functioning, something within you responds. You adapt. You seek solutions. You develop because alternatives are absent. Difficulty compels movement. But comfortable territory operates differently. Comfort allows you to remain static for months, for years, sometimes for decades. While slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, it extracts something genuine from you. Your edge. Your hunger. The sharpness generated by authentic challenge. Your conviction that more remains possible and accessible, and you don't sense it departing. That's the cruelest aspect of comfortable stagnation. It announces nothing. No alarms. No obvious signals. Just gradual, progressive settling. Until one day you recognize that the fire you carried years ago has diminished to something smaller, quieter. Machiavelli wrote about this principle with clarity that disturbed his contemporaries. He argued that the greatest long-term threat to authority and position wasn't visible opposition. It was the illusion of security that caused people to cease the practices that originally built their strength. When individuals felt safe, they grew complacent. When they grew complacent, they softened. And softness, within a world that continues moving regardless of your motion, simply represents slower forms of decline. This exact pattern manifests in everyday existence through circumstances so familiar they should provoke discomfort. The position that compensates adequately to remove financial pressure but stopped challenging you years ago. The connection that doesn't actively cause pain but also doesn't generate growth, where two individuals coexist from habit and convenience rather than genuine engagement and mutual development. The location you remained in not because it serves your direction but because departure demands more energy than staying. The project you continue postponing because current conditions remain comfortable enough to eliminate urgency. Comfort preserves people within all these spaces. Comfort articulates statements like, "It's not that terrible, it could be worse. At least you know what to expect here." And that voice nearly always represents the most expensive voice you'll ever entertain. Machiavelli's position on this was unambiguous. Genuine security originates not from comfort but from capability, from continuous development, from consistently ensuring your capacities exceed what your current circumstances demand. Because the moment growth ceases, you begin losing ground, even if nothing visible changes, even if everything appears stable externally. Here's a question worth honest reflection. Is your current situation strengthening you or softening you? Is the path you occupy genuinely constructing something meaningful or primarily protecting you from discomfort? If you departed your current circumstances tomorrow, position, connection, location, mindset, would you look back in 5 years and feel the period built you, or that you simply waited? These questions generate discomfort intentionally, because growth requires friction. Appropriate challenge doesn't indicate something broken. It indicates something genuine occurring, something that will compound into authentic capability and authentic progress. If a situation, environment, relationship, or belief system has halted your growth, it represents the wrong path, regardless of familiarity, regardless of how much easier staying appears, regardless of how persistently the comfortable voice insists you're fine. Comfort that costs your future isn't safety. Slow, quiet loss. And the awareness to recognize it before it's claimed years from you. That awareness constitutes everything. Number 6. Calculate consequences, not moments. Every determination you make contains two components, the moment and the consequence. And most individuals live almost entirely focused on the moment. They select based on what feels beneficial immediately. What reduces current tension? What satisfies present need? What quiets today's discomfort or produces instant reward? The consequence either doesn't enter consideration or enters vaguely as distant abstraction they'll address when it arrives. But here's what those operating this way never fully accept: consequences always arrive. This represents one of the most consistent fundamental distinctions between those who construct something enduring over time and those who remain trapped in cycles they can't escape. It's not always about talent. It's not always about opportunity. It's frequently about time horizon, about how far forward someone is willing and trained to think before determining. The individual who builds an existence they genuinely respect is the individual who can examine a current choice and honestly trace what that choice will cost or yield in 6 months, in 1 year, in 5 years, and then determine based on that honest projection, not on what's exciting, or comfortable or emotionally satisfying at this moment. Machiavelli returned to this point consistently throughout his work. He watched leader after leader, powerful figure after powerful figure, make determinations appearing brilliant in immediate terms that proved catastrophic over duration. He observed alliances formed for quick advantage that generated deep instability later. He watched individuals select short-term victories that converted into long-term opposition. He noted how short-term thinking patterns served as one of the most reliable predictors of eventual failure, regardless of intelligence level, regardless of resource access, regardless of initial opportunity. Short-term pleasure selected consistently over long-term positioning produces an existence that feels satisfying in moments and hollow across time. The expenditure providing immediate relief while creating financial pressure following you for years. The avoidance of difficult but necessary conversation feeling like peace temporarily while generating damaged connection or missed correction later. The pattern of selecting rest when effort was required, acceptable occasionally, genuinely costly when it becomes default. None of these appear dramatic. None feel like major disasters in the moment. That's precisely why they're dangerous. They compound silently. Strategic thinking means deliberately training yourself to extend your view, not obsessively. You can't live entirely years ahead and still experience your present. But habitually, particularly before significant determinations, before anything major, you must compel yourself to trace the full range of likely consequences. Here's a practice Machiavelli essentially articulated and modern strategic thinkers have formalized. Before any significant determination, don't begin by imagining best case. Begin by imagining worst case. If this proceeds genuinely wrong, not slightly wrong, genuinely wrong, what does that situation resemble? Do you survive it? Can you rebuild from it? Does realistic downside justify realistic upside? Most impulsive determinations collapse completely under that question. Because when you genuinely imagine worst realistic outcome and recognize it as something you cannot easily recover from, that information should dramatically alter your approach. Either it prevents error, or it pushes you to construct protections before proceeding. Authority belongs to those who prepare for consequences before those consequences materialize, not to those who react once they've already arrived and already cost something. Train yourself to think in duration. Think past the moment. Think past the temporary relief or temporary excitement. And ask yourself honestly, what is the genuine life cost of this selection? What does the version of my existence 1 year from now resemble if I make this determination today? Ask that question with discipline and honesty, and it will protect you from more regret than almost anything else possibly could. Number 7. Adjust trajectory early without ego. This final section represents where most individuals fail, not because it's most difficult to comprehend. In pure logical terms, it may be the most straightforward concept in this entire presentation. People fail here due to something more personal than logic: pride. Pride explains why individuals remain in misaligned careers for years, sometimes entire decades, after some internal awareness already recognizes it isn't right. Pride explains why people maintain strategies that evidence has clearly stopped supporting, doubling down instead of adapting. Because changing course feels like standing publicly and announcing error. And for many, that sensation of being wrong, visibly, publicly wrong, feels worse than continuing to fail quietly. That isn't strength. That's ego wearing commitment's mask. And ego left unexamined ranks among the most reliable, invisible destroyers of human potential. Machiavelli wasn't subtle on this point. He observed repeatedly that those maintaining authority, adapting, surviving, and continuing to build across changing circumstances weren't those who never erred. Every person in any position of genuine influence makes errors. That isn't the differentiator. The differentiator was this: those who endured recognized their errors early and corrected without hesitation, without needing to justify the wrong move to preserve reputation. without prioritizing appearance of consistency over reality of results. Machiavelli valued results above appearance, above constructed narratives about identity, above images of someone who always knew exactly what they were doing. Actual, measurable results. And what this means practically deserves genuine consideration. If you occupy wrong trajectory, the cost of remaining doesn't stay constant. It compounds. Each week spent moving wrong direction represents another week distant from where you need to be. Each month, maintaining approach that isn't producing results represents additional month of your time, energy, resources, irreplaceable opportunities, all moving incorrectly. The earlier you correct, the less it ultimately costs you. Always. Changing course isn't weakness. Let me be absolutely direct about that. Changing course represents one of the clearest demonstrations of genuine strategic intelligence available. It requires more honest courage to declare, "This isn't functioning, I need to adjust," than to continue because you fear what adjustment says about you. It requires more genuine discipline to correct early than to remain comfortable in wrong direction because at least wrong direction feels familiar. Here's an analogy making this undeniable. A pilot detecting course deviation of 2 degrees and correcting immediately makes small, simple adjustment and arrives at destination on schedule. A pilot waiting 3 hours before correcting that same 2-degree deviation now requires massive, disruptive course alteration, and may have already overflown the destination entirely. 2 degrees off course caught early means almost nothing. 2 degrees off course sustained for years produces completely different existence than intended. Release the ego. Evaluate your current path with honesty, not using investment already made as measurement. The time and energy already expended aren't reasons to continue direction that isn't right. They're simply expended. What remains protectable is what lies ahead. Correct without drama. Correct without self-punishment. Correct because you value your future more than you value appearing as someone who always knew exactly what they were doing. Results over ego. That's the standard. That's always the standard. The sooner you adjust, the less you lose. And willingness to adjust honestly, clearly, without requiring it to appear a certain way, this genuinely separates those building something real from those spending lives defending choices that never worked. Most individuals recognize they've occupied wrong trajectory when recovery of what was lost is no longer possible. Not completely impossible. You can always restart. You can always rebuild. Existence offers more opportunities than most recognize in the moment, but late enough that years have detached. Late enough that energy, hunger, and absolute certainty that more remains possible, the kind living strongly within you when young and everything remains open, has dimmed into something quieter, heavier, something that doesn't quite believe as it once did. And that's the genuine cost, not merely external losses, missed opportunities, wrong investments of time and trust. The internal cost, gradual confidence erosion. The quiet voice that previously pushed forward becoming a quiet voice wondering if it's too late, if you missed your window, if this is simply what existence contains. This happens to capable people, genuinely capable people, intelligent people, people who worked hard, desired something real, possessed everything needed to construct it. They simply never acquired framework for evaluating their direction clearly. They trusted too quickly. They permitted emotions to determine what strategy should have determined. They remained comfortable when discomfort was required. They chased approval when conviction needed building. They thought in moments when years required consideration. And they allowed pride to maintain wrong trajectory long after something within already recognized it as wrong. These aren't fatal character flaws. They're patterns. And patterns can be recognized. And recognized patterns can shift, but only if you see them. That's always the initial most critical step, seeing clearly. If this content is reaching you today, if this message is landing in this precise moment, I encourage you to take that seriously. Because sometimes accurate information arrives exactly when needed, not after major error has already occurred, not years later when damage has already compounded. Now, before. And if that describes your position, here's what I recommend. Pause. Not conceptually, actually pause. Step back from whatever currently occupies your existence and examine your most significant current determinations. Honestly, the professional trajectory you're following, the connections you're investing in, the patterns repeating, The direction you're actually moving versus direction you intended. Pose the questions this presentation outlined. Ask who benefits from your current path. Ask what long-term consequences your most significant choices will realistically generate. Ask whether those closest have earned that proximity through consistent behavior. Ask whether you're determining from strategy or from fear, approval, pride, or comfort-seeking. Ask whether situations feeling safe are genuinely building you or slowly softening you. If you answer these questions honestly, you'll know. You'll recognize, you laughed, whether you occupy correct trajectory or whether correction requires implementation. Right now, before this concludes, if anything presented today shifted how you perceive your situation, engage with the like button. It costs nothing and genuinely helps this content reach someone else who may need it as much as you did today. Share this with someone in your life positioned at a crossroads. Someone facing significant determination. Someone appearing trapped in a loop they can't identify. Someone benefiting from hearing this before costs increase further. And if you desire continued development of this kind of strategic, clear awareness about navigating existence, power, and determination, subscribe to this channel, Winds of Thought, right now. Each video we produce aims to provide the type of thinking most individuals spend decades attempting to develop through painful experience alone. Don't wait for painful experience when awareness remains available. The correct path was never located through luck. It was never about luck. It's selected through strategy, through careful observation of people and situations, through honest self-evaluation that doesn't flinch from what it observes, and through discipline to act on what you observe, even when ego urges remaining exactly where you are. Each correction you implement today represents something your future self won't need to pay for. Each difficult question you pose now represents a regret that never forms. Each moment of honest awareness you construct now represents protection around the future you're attempting to create. Because in existence, the greatest danger was never failure. The greatest danger is walking wrong trajectory each day and naming it normal, growing comfortable within it, constructing identity around it, and awakening years from now inside an existence you never genuinely selected, wondering how you arrived there. You possess better understanding now. You hold the framework. You carry the awareness. Do you have the corrections? Apply them. Choose deliberately. Protect your future, because the path remains before you, and the direction you move from this moment forward is entirely yours to determine.